Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the JAGS PGA Golf Stream. Another session. Joining me today is my good friend Tony Altieri. And Tony, I already see that I made an error on the intro. It was referencing the 2021 U.S. Open, so that's just the intro. Let's get past that. But how you doing, Tony?
Good, man. Good. Exciting week for us in the golf world. Rick hit a winner. I hit a winner. So we're excited, man. We're ready to carry it forward.
Yeah, let's talk about that winner. I mean, it seemed to be like Rick was not on Morikawa. You were. I know some of the other experts in the field were not on him. What drew you to him? I mean, what was the magic there, Tony?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the old rule, right? Like when you're buying real estate, like the old rule is to buy the worst house in the best neighborhood, right? And Morikawa was by far the best player at the number that he was. And so when you take out all the variables, because I think the narrative behind all of this, at least leading up into the Open, including myself, this is the part that I got wrong, was you were going to have to deal with weather and wind and conditions, and links experience was going to be vital to success at the Open, and you should be playing Euros and yada, yada, yada. That was the narrative, myself included in that was kind of being spoken about for the Open. And so Morikawa, because he didn't fit any one of those narratives, he was kind of ignored by a bunch of folks. But I kept telling myself, and it goes back to the original thing that we talked about in our very first one, which is you bet the best guy at the best possible number, and his number was just wrong. At 40-1, he is the best iron player in the world. We talked about the importance of approach at a course like this, and that number was just absolutely mispriced. So I think that's what drew me to him. And whenever I'm reviewing a board, doesn't matter whether it's the British Open, a major, one of the tournaments like we have this week, the 3M, which is a lower level tournament. It doesn't matter. Like if the number's wrong, you should be hitting the number. And so Morikawa's number was just wrong to me, and I benefited greatly from it. I mean, we can get into it a little bit, but the other part of it is the other guy that I was heavily invested in was Spieth. I mean, and he was the complete opposite of that. He met all of the narrative molds that you had to have great strokes gained, short game, and scrambling and all these things like that. And you had to get lucky and be able to get up and down from a trash can. And Spieth was that guy. He did all of the things he was supposed to, but it just seemed like Morikawa just was like a force of will. Like he was just unstoppable. And every single putt, which I think has always been the Achilles heel of Morikawa, he drained. I mean, it was like, it didn't matter if it was 8 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet, a downhill, curved shot. It didn't matter. He drained everything. And I think I benefited from the fact that he was just the best guy in the field at the worst number. And, that's why I took it. So I can't take all of the credit for it because it just fits like what I do week to week in terms of having some kind of premonition about Morikawa winning. But I think going back to my original comment is you just take the best guy at the best possible number. And if something seems wrong, you need to hit that number and bet that guy.
Yeah, I mean, he was 19th overall in your model. So
Yep.
he was top 20 in your model, and he was right in that sweet spot where you like to bet those guys, right? I mean, I think you go as low as about 20 on the odds, and I mean, what's that sweet spot for you?
Yeah, I mean, you and I both, because we talked about this a bunch, is I don't really like to go lower than 30 if I think something's wrong. Like if you get a guy like Dustin or JT or anybody like that that's below 25-1, then that makes sense to bet that because those guys are typically in the teens or even single digit from time to time. But for me, I don't like to dip below 30 very often unless I just think like this is that guy's week. And for him to be 40, that was just, again, egregiously mispriced in my opinion.
Yeah.
I was on Spieth at 20-1, but that sweet spot for me, I like to live kind of, let's call it 28-50. Like that's where I love to be. And that's where I think we continuously see winners, especially winners at majors.
Yeah, how'd you feel coming down the stretch having both your guys? You had bet on Spieth and Morikawa.
Yeah.
You had to be feeling really good. Louis was there, but he was tanking. I mean,
I would tell you this because you and I, we have this ongoing chatter that goes on, whether it's text or Twitter or whatever, talking about what's happening. I had said early Thursday and Friday that Louis looked like a different guy. So for the first time ever, having Spieth and Morikawa, I was a little bit nervous about Louis going into the weekend because he just looked like a different guy. He looked very focused. Everything was hitting was pure. But then it kind of triggered for me. I'm like, this is the guy that has the most top five, second place finishes at a major. And so even Saturday, when he played more like you typically see him play, which is kind of safe, he never really goes out and blitzes the field. He kind of plays safe and hopes that other guys go wrong so that way he can take advantage of it. So on Sunday, I was actually very, very comfortable, even when things had just gotten started. The guy that I was probably the most worried about early in the day was Rahm. And, John Rahm, if he hits, I don't know, half of the 10-foot putts that he had during the course of the weekend, he probably runs away with this thing, but the dude could not hit a putt. So coming down the stretch, especially the back nine, with both Spieth and Morikawa there, to be honest with you, I was already counting the money. For lack of a better term, I was sitting pretty. Where I was glued early to the TV, I kind of backed away. I was hanging out with the kids. I was talking to a buddy of mine. Like I told you, we were on vacation in a cabin up in the mountains. So it was a very relaxing time for me because I knew, regardless of whether it was Spieth or Morikawa, that I was walking away a winner. Obviously, I wanted Morikawa because the odds were better, but my net investment and what my return was going to be was close enough where it didn't really matter at the end of the day whether it was Spieth or Morikawa.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell Louis woke up on the wrong side of the bed. I mean, he just didn't have it. And,
he's your guy, man. He just
Layup Louis, right? We call him Layup Louis. No, he's my guy. Unfortunately, I didn't play him this week. I wish I would have in my DraftKings lineup, but he was a little high price. Yeah. I'm not used to that, and I paid the price for it. I totally agree with you, Rahm. It kind of felt like the U.S. Open, right? He got off to a slow start that first round, and that final round, and then kicked it in gear towards the end, and that's exactly what he did on Sunday. And I couldn't believe how fast he was rising up the board. So it was very impressive.
I mean, he came out and he shot 71 in the opening round, and you kind of thought, okay, the pressure, being the favorite, it's pretty much done. And he comes out Friday and shoots 64, which is, basically he tied the best round of the day with Morikawa. So, going into the weekend, you're thinking, all right, Rahm's positioned to make a run here. And then his Saturday is really what doomed him, is that the guy couldn't hit a putt. It was the same thing when he was at the Scottish. He just could not make any putts. But on Sunday, he comes out guns blazing. He shoots a 66. I think he, Spieth, and Morikawa all shot 66 on Sunday, which is insane. The only guy I think that shot a better round was maybe Koepka on Sunday. I think Koepka shot 65. I mean, when you look retrospectively at the leaderboard, how it broke down on Sunday, you had the best guys in the world there competing. Oddly enough, Mackenzie Hughes, who I joked about with Rick on the DraftKings show, was kind of Jordan Spieth 0.5. Like all of the things that Spieth does well and all the places that Spieth plays well, Mackenzie Hughes tends to play well on the same kind of track. Mackenzie Hughes is right there, just like he was in the U.S. Open. For a minute, a brief second, Corey Connors was hovering around that 9-10 mark, and I thought, Connors could make a run here, and then he returned to being Corey Connors, and he kind of fell apart down the back stretch. So, nothing ventured, nothing gained there. But, to me, I felt very, very comfortable. It's the best major in terms of betting that I've ever had, and for outright, what's the word I'm looking for? Outcome, right? Yeah. It just to be in there, and the two guys that really have an opportunity to win, pulling away from the rest of the field and having tickets on both guys. It's a unique place. I've never been there before, but I'll tell you what, I hope to be there more often.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, you sent a little text over that the sweat was real, and I was like, what are you sweating about? Morikawa had this locked up like when he woke up this morning and in the morning, and he was just, focused. I could not believe the par putts he was saving. So it was an amazing thing for him. And Tony, I'm taking a look back a couple of weeks. You hit English at the Travelers at 40-1 with your model. Spot on. Again, amazing. You hit Cam Davis at the Rocket Mortgage. Now, disappointing to our JAGS fans, we did not release that information. You withheld that from them. Since then, we've made a change. And, because Tony does make some... I think Cam Davis, what happened there, he was an early ad for you on your card, right? He wasn't a late ad. And you just... No,
I omitted him from the actual thing because I want to say I hit him. I had him at like 125 or something ridiculous.
Some crazy number.
And a lot of the bombs, because I'm just sprinkling that deep down the board, I think I just forgot to add him to the list. So I actually had bet him earlier, and I had been betting Cam Davis all year, and it was just lucked out that it worked out that way.
Yeah, so like 3 out of the last 4 weeks, you're killing it. So very cool. And then I think Rick hit a winner last night, right? And
Yeah,
the other tournament.
yeah. Rick placed one bet in the Riku, who does the DraftKings show with us, just so everybody's aware. But Rick placed one bet in the Barbasol, and it was on Seamus Powers, who we were laughing. I mean, he was your guy a week ago,
Yeah.
and if you think about it, like he had just been trending, like all of his finishes, very similar to a guy that I'm looking at this week. He had just been like top 10, top 10, top 10, and you just felt like his time was coming. He almost gagged it away on the second playoff hole when he shanked a shot off the tee left, but he recovered great. Ultimately, it was JT Poston who melted. I think he hit, it was like the sixth or seventh playoff hole. He had a ball in the water, and that spelled the end for him. But I felt bad for JT because the guy's going into, I think, the last 3 or 4 holes of the tournament. He's got like a 3-stroke lead, and he just grenades, and it goes into this playoff, the 6-hole playoff. So I was happy for Rick, overall for us doing the show to have 4 out of the last 5 winners called. That's pretty cool, man. That's a nice little run for the year. We've had a great year. I think we're like 15 out of like 40 tournaments, which is insane for calling winners. So it's been a good run this year. I think the big thing is that with everything that's happened with COVID, it feels like the statistical models have been more, what's the word I'm looking for? More predictive than usual. I mean, we know this golf's so variable, especially golf betting and DFS. But it feels like the modeling has been more spot on than not. And like I said, philosophically, where I like to play on the board, that's where the winners have come from. It's been in that 20 to 60 range. We've just continually been hitting guys. There's only been 1 or 2 guys who have been the favorites, and there's been 1 or 2 bombs, Cam Davis included in that have really shown up and won tournaments this year. But I think by and large, it's been a good run. And the Open was just such great TV. Everything about it. I think Spieth being in contention the entire time, him going out and being basically in second place the entire tournament, other than going into the final round, made for great TV. I think the international market and domestic folks love watching Jordan Spieth, and he's kind of like the New England Patriots in the NFL. When the Patriots are good, everybody pays attention. Whether you love them or hate them, it's very, very interesting. It makes everything, the conversation around it, much more entertaining when they're good. And the same thing with Jordan Spieth. When Jordan Spieth is playing his best golf, whether you enjoy and like the way that he plays or you don't, it makes for much better conversation, much more eyeballs, and much better, professional level golf.
Yeah, if he doesn't get off, I mean, he had like 2 bogeys in the first 6 holes. If he doesn't start that way, he's right there. And then he turned it on, and I was kind of pulling for him, but realizing that you got Morikawa at 40 to 1, I started leaning towards Morikawa. So anyhow, our buddy Rick was a little bummed he's not on Morikawa, but a lot of the experts just stayed off of him, like you said, because I mean, this is his first Open. They were a little shy about him not playing a lot of links, and but hey, he did say, if it burns me, it burns me. I'll come back strong the next week. And just,
and to Rick's defense, his track record has been he's terrible in majors. He's just been god awful in majors this year. But he's done fantastic in the sub tournaments. The one tournament when he took down, I think it was the 555 or the 550 on DraftKings. Mm-hmm. That was a subfield event. It was like a no-name hit and giggle course, similar to what we have right now. And he does really, really well in those on DraftKings. So I'm interested to see, and hear his take for the 3M this week. It's kind of rinse and repeat with what we've seen the last few weeks. But, hey, major season is done. We get into kind of the doldrums of the summer golf season where these tournaments are not that great. We do have the Olympics coming up next week, so that is kind of a cool mix-in that we haven't had. Justin Rose is, quote-unquote, the defending champion, right? He's the gold medalist from 4 years ago, or 5 years ago, I guess, if we're keeping track appropriately. So it'll be interesting. There's a lot of narratives around Olympic golf and what that plays like in the course that they're going to be playing in Japan, but it'll be a nice break. I haven't seen odds anywhere on it, so I don't know if people will be betting on Olympics level golf, but I'm sure there'll be lines out there, and we'll see. If there is, hey, we'll put together a show and see how it goes.
Yeah, so as Tony mentioned, we did start up last week a DraftKings show. That's going to be every Tuesday for the most part at 7 o'clock. Tony and I will do the betting show on Monday at 7 o'clock. So put that on your radar. I definitely recommend it. These 2 guys, Tony and Rick, are some of the hottest. I mean, if there's anyone hotter than Tony right now, anywhere, I mean, I'd like to see who that is. And I guarantee you, if there is someone hotter, they're not sharing this data like Tony is. So get on board, folks. I mean, you're missing out right now. You never know. It could turn on a dime, right? Next week, all of a sudden, we go into a slump. But while it's hot, at least compare your tickets to who's Tony's putting on his card and Rick's putting on his card. And I think you'll have much better chances if you do that right now.
Yeah, like I said, there was a stretch there about 4 or 5 weeks where I think, and again, you were going through the pain with me as I was hitting second and third places for like 4 or 5 weeks. But it kicked back up again. So again, the model's been great all year. The way that it's kind of worked out, and that all of the stats information we're pulling off of Fantasy National, which to me is the best tool out there and available. But we put together our own custom modeling, and if you're interested in that, like Mike's talked about and like I've talked about in previous episodes, reach out to us on Twitter. It's at DFSJags. Be happy to share the information. Shoot us a DM. We can share that info with you, or give us an email at dfsjags@gmail.com. And like I said, we would love to share the wealth, and that way when we win, you win, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you touched on another point I want to bring up. I mean, we've brought Jags back now for about 5 sessions, but prior to us starting up, Tony, you had been killing it in the last, I don't know, what was it, 3 to 5 months prior to us getting this going again?
Yeah.
So the model's been working consistently for you, which is fantastic. I mean, we talked about it on the first session. I think we introduced everybody to how you've been doing in the past year with your model and your betting. So pretty cool stuff. Again, I'm amazed. It just feels like every Sunday, I don't even have to look. I just know one of your guys is in contention. It just feels that way.
It makes for an interesting sweat. That's for damn sure. When you have a pony in the race, when they make that turn, everybody knows, if you've gone to horse racing, when they make that turn and you got a horse that's towards the front, it's one of the most exciting things. It's the same thing in golf, man. When you've got a guy who's in contention on Sunday, it just makes everything that much more entertaining. And I don't care if you got 50 cents on a guy, or if it's just you and your buddies calling out bets, whatever it may be. Like, that just makes it so much more entertaining.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, Tony,
you know what I do want to ask you, Mike, is, the one thing not related to betting and all the stuff we've been talking about, but is related to the Open, is kind of what happened with Bryson DeChambeau and, his struggles. He made the cut, which was fine, but, he blew up. I think it was on Friday after his round, and talked about how his driver was just not ready, right? Like, the driver wasn't performing right, that they needed to go back and re-engineer this thing. And so he got into this very visible spat with one of his biggest sponsors in Cobra, and Cobra's owned, I think, by Puma or vice versa. And so it was really interesting to see it, because we haven't really seen anything like that in golf before, where a guy's kind of called out his manufacturer for having subpar equipment. And he got lambasted by the media, by Twitter, by over and over again on the commentary for the brief moments that we saw him on camera. That's all he wanted to talk about was him kind of going off on Cobra. And again, he apologized for it. He was very forthright in doing that. But I'm curious, did you how much visibility did you have into that, and kind of what your take is on everything that happened with Bryson this week?
So I didn't see any of that, but I think he got what he deserves. I mean, blaming the hardware is not something anyone should do. I mean, the hardware had been working before. He's going through a rough period. Whatever. Do we ever find out what happened with his caddy?
It never really came out. You're spot on. He's been going through a really rough patch in terms of his very public, let's call it, golf life. He's been struggling as of late. The only thing I would say about the equipment piece, and it's not that I want to defend Bryson at all, but I mean, it felt like people were piling on. A lot of people were calling him out, and even Koepka in his post round comments was saying, "Oh, the driver worked great today. I love my manufacturer. I love my driver." So it seemed like everybody was kind of poking fun at him. I will say this, and it's not an excuse for saying those kinds of things, because Bryson does come off very pretentious and at times a little bit aloof. But I think there's something that you have to keep in mind, is when you're talking about somebody like Bryson, who's highly intellectual, very, very smart person, right? It's been well documented that he is super high IQ. He's very dedicated to his process and the way that he approaches things, and it's all based off of metrics. So he's constantly looking at different things. If there's any guy in golf who's going to call out a manufacturer for the way a piece of equipment is performing, and be able to talk to it from a place of, let's call it being well educated or understanding the aerodynamics and the weighting of a club and saying that it's just not ready yet, or maybe it's just not right for him. To me, it's Bryson, right? If Rory comes out and says those things, it's like whatever. But to me, when you think about a guy like Bryson, they call him the scientist was his name before he bulked up and became, this massive version of himself. Highly intellectual guy, takes all variables into consideration. If any guy is going to be looking at the numbers, checking how his driver's designed and performing, looking at all the technical aspects, it's him. So if somebody's going to call out a manufacturer for not being ready, I'm going to give those comments more weight to a guy like Bryson than I would anybody else.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying there, but it's not like he got a new driver, right? Unless I'm missing something. He didn't just get a new driver for this tournament or the previous tournament, right? This is the driver he's been using for quite some time.
He had been bouncing back. So the Cobra has the Rad, which is the newest version of their driver. All of their stuff is Rad. Before that, I'm not sure if it was the F9 or whatever it was, but he had been bouncing back and forth between previous versions of the driver and had not fully embraced and adopted the brand new model because he didn't like the way that it sounded. He didn't like the way that it felt. He didn't like the numbers that he was seeing on TrackMan, which is basically his gospel for how he looks at the way that he's striking the ball. So for a guy at that level to go into the last major of a year into a course where I think we all felt like his course fit was not the best, but hey, if he's at full confidence, at full strength, got everything dialed in, he could go in there and potentially compete. For him to walk in with a driver that he felt mixed emotions about, I could see how that could hurt his performance. Again, some of it was emotions driven because he was not playing well and all of the other things that you talked about kind of circling him. But I think the driver is a problem for him. And just like any golfer, whether it's a PGA Tour pro or it's me and you, like if you don't have confidence in a club, it's very difficult to go out and play well with it because you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and that's what he's all about, the driver, right? That's what gets his game in the gear, is all about that 330, 340 yard drive. And from there, everything else is kind of easy. He's doing these small chip shots into the green. But yeah, so he'll get back to it. I'm sure he will. I mean, like you said, he's probably studying it 24/7. See what's going wrong. He'll figure it out.
100%.
And he'll get through whatever is going on with him. So, good stuff there. Yeah, good. I had not heard that, so that's interesting, Tony. All right, Tony. Any closing thoughts on the U.S. Open before we move into the 3M Open this week?
So the Open Championship. You said U.S.
Sorry.
Open again. Just calling you out.
The Open and the U.S. Open, they're too close together. What the heck?
I know. It's funny too because I had always called it the British Open, which is a huge faux pas, I guess, if you're talking to people that call it the Open Championship, and we kind of joked about that on the DFS show with Rick. But I would say overall couldn't be happier with the way things shook out. You look at the top of the board. I mean, it's elites. It was Louis, it was Spieth, it was Morikawa, Rahm, Brooks. Like, there were no big surprises. So I think it shook out the way that it probably should have. And retrospectively, everybody that kind of was off calling now was kind of scratching their head going, okay, that was a mistake, and I'm not going to make that mistake again. So we'll see. He tends to get disrespected by the books and by DFS because he doesn't drive the ball 350 yards and all of these things that we see with guys like Brooks and Rahm and Bryson. But I'm interested to see how things shake out for him next year as we get into these majors, because I think even with all that he's accomplished, you could see that number drift where you're going to find him in the high 20s, low 30s, maybe even in the 40s come major season again next year.
Totally agree. I will say something about the DraftKings show from last week. So I love you guys giving us the ownership percentages, the projections. I couldn't believe how spot on they were, Tony. So I sprinkled in a little DeChambeau because I think Rick had mentioned he's going to be like 4% owned. I'm like, no way, right? I'll be damned. It's 4% owned. So I know you get that data from Fantasy National, I believe. Is that where it comes from as well? Super helpful. Super helpful. I mean, especially if you want to get because one of my problems is I don't play that many lineups, and I am super chalky. So whenever I'm trying to make a run, everyone else has my guys, so I'm not able to catch up. So to differentiate a little bit, it's nice to have that information. So again, just giving a little bit of a shout out to the DraftKings show, because that information is super helpful if you're partaking in DraftKings at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are getting that information from Fantasy National, but I think the game theory, right? Having the stones to be able to grab a guy that is going to be low owned, I think is the most important thing, because if you can differentiate your lineup even just a little bit, right? Just slightly different, and then that guy pops, now all of a sudden you've got a massive advantage over 70, 80, 90% of the people in there. So, the lineup that won had Morikawa, had Spieth, had Louis, and Spieth and Louis were highly owned, but Morikawa wasn't. So it's just a prime example of kind of that same theory that we talked about even with betting, which is to buy the basically the crappiest house in the best neighborhood. Take the guy that looks like he's mispriced, where it has the most value, and then you jump in on that guy.
I do want to make one note, Tony. I get super lucky every now and then. Last couple of weeks, I've made a call. You talked about Tyrell Hatton. And I said, he's not going to make the cut, Tony. I'm tired of hearing about him. He always tanks my lineups. And I called it out last week. He said he's going to miss the cut. And what happened, Tony? He missed the cut.
He missed the cut. He missed the cut. No, it was a good call. And I mean, Tyrell Hatton, Reed, there were quite a few guys that, Rick and I talked about just ad nauseum in the show, where these guys were going to be highly owned because they fit all of those narratives, right? They were links players, they're gutty guys, they're scramblers, they're tough, like all of these things. And so everybody gravitated to all those guys. But you hit it on the head, dude. You're like, hey, Tyrell Hatton, every time, everybody expects him to show up and be, this world killer, he kind of falls flat, and the same thing happened. He didn't have a good week. He didn't play very well. He struggled off the tee. He didn't putt. There was just nothing flashy him about this week, and I think a lot of it has to do with everyone. Everyone expected there to be weather and wind and the conditions to be a major factor, and it wasn't. Without that, the course lacks defense, and so naturally the best ball strikers in the world will rise to the top. And that's exactly what happened. Without the weather, without the wind, the course became very gettable, and the guys who were putting the ball in the right positions were the ones that ultimately won. And that was Morikawa to a tee.
Totally agree. All right, Tony, well, let's get into it. Let's get into the 3M Open this week, and let's look at the course and key stats.
Yep. So the 3M, your winner last year, Michael Thompson. I think he outdueled Tony Finau. Gosh, our poor guy Tony Finau. I keep hoping he's going to win one of these things. It bums me out to no end that he just can't get it done. But anyways, TPC Twin Cities in Blaine, Minnesota. It's an Arnold Palmer design. Tom Lehman did the redesign here most recently. Par 71, 7,400 yards. If you've watched the John Deere, if you've watched the Rocket Mortgage, it's rinse and repeat. It's exactly the same thing. So all of the same stats that we were looking for, particularly for the Rocket Mortgage, and if you look at the top of that leaderboard for the Rocket Mortgage, I think you're going to see a lot of the same guys rise to the top here. It's strokes gained approach, it's scoring, it's off the tee, it's greens and regulation. It's about how fast you can get to 20 under. Now, again, the course played in terms of the types of players in the 2 years that this tournament has been on course played a little bit different. The first year, it was Wolf chipping in for Eagle on the last hole to outlast Morikawa and DeChambeau. Last year, like I said, Thompson, I think, won by 2 strokes over Finau. Finau faded down the stretch, and Thompson won it. But the profiles for the types of guys were drastically different. It's not that the course played ultimately like night and day or anything like that. It's just that the profile of the guys that were towards the top of the board was much different in terms of the skill sets and what you would expect to see. Because typically what we see on the PGA is the same kinds of guys play well at the same kinds of courses over and over and over again. So this being the third time that we'll see TPC Twin Cities on the PGA Tour, it'll be really interesting to see whether it plays more like the 2019 rendition or the one that we saw last year in 2020.
Interesting. Yeah, I was looking at your key stats, and it does seem very similar to the 3 others that you mentioned. So let's get right into it. Let's look at your stats and course history ranking.
Yeah, so like I talked about, not to jump forward, but the course history piece, there's not a lot of course history. There's only been 2 years of this tournament. So a lot of guys towards the top of the course history piece, they only played in one rendition of it, and they might have had a top 3, top 4 finish. I think, as a matter of fact, last year, there was something ridiculous, like 8 or 10 guys that were tied for third place here. So you can see that there's a number of guys towards the top of the board. Again, 2 years of history. But in terms of stat rank, when you start looking at the things that I put into the model, one thing that you will glaringly see is I did not include putting. So if you look at the guys towards the top, it's the absolute worst putters on the PGA Tour. That's Keegan Bradley and Emiliano Grillo. The one thing I will say, and this is something that we talked about offline when Yumi and Rick were talking about the shows this week and guys we were thinking about. The auto bet for Rick this week was Matthew Wolf. For me, it was Grillo. I looked at kind of how he's been performing, what he's been doing, how he shot at the Open, and I think he sets up really, really well. Again, he sets up great statistically everywhere because he's just an immaculate ball striker. But I feel very strongly about him this week here. And if you look at some of the guys here in terms of the guys that have had success at this course, and then the key stats, right? Because we're using historical information, statistical information to be able to say, okay, what stats correlate with success here? You can see there's a lot of crossover between these two different aspects of the model. Grillo's, second in stats. He's first in course history. Matthew Wolf, who we mentioned, he has obviously a win and then a top 12. Finau's played well here. So a lot of the guys you'll see will be on multiple of these rankings over and over again. The other guy I really, really like who's pictured here is Doug Ghim. Ghim's a guy coming in with very, very good form. The things that he does well, that's what this course demands. The big thing about this course, I mentioned that it's a hit and giggle, right? There's nothing too demanding about it. You'll hear this over and over and over, kind of like wind and weather was last week for the Open. You'll hear this place has a ton of water. It does, and optically, for TV and for people like me and you, the water's going to come into play for folks like us. For most of the guys on the PGA Tour, the water's not going to be an issue, right? It looks great on TV. It looks ominous. It does all those things. But for these guys, the water is not going to create the same kind of mental issues that it does for regular folks.
So if I'm looking at that stats and course history rank, Tony, am I just throwing out the course history? I mean, I'm just going to be looking at your stat ranking is what it sounds like. And I'm sure you have to change your model a little bit when you don't have the course history, right? You have to weight things slightly different.
Yep. So I think it comes down to the weighting. You hit it there on the head. Is while course history will continue to be an aspect in every one of the models, there's some times where I just don't weight it as heavily. This is an example of that, right? If a guy has really good course history, I'm going to factor that in positively. If we have a guy who has never played this course before, I will have almost no weighting for that guy coming in. If he's got great form and statistically he sets up well, he's going to rank very well in the model, even though he's never played the course before. So I don't want to negatively impact a guy. Where at a course like Augusta, if you've never played Augusta before, that's an automatic detraction in my model for you. At a place like this, if you've never played the 3M, I'll find some corollary courses like the course that's played at the RSM or like what was played at the Rocket Mortgage here. There's so many similar courses to this that you can draw a lot of correlation between how guys have performed there and how they will perform at a course like this. And like I said, statistically, really what you need is ball strikers. You need guys who can score in bunches, and you just got to hope that one of those guys just gets a hot putter for the week.
Totally agree. Let's move on to the overall model rank.
Yep. So you can see, kind of like I talked about, we highlighted Grillo. He's number one in the model. Course history number one, stat rank number two, form rank number 9. Had a very good showing at the Open. Finau, again, another statistical freak, is going to show up well here. The other guy that everybody will be playing this week. So if you're doing DraftKings, expect Grillo, Lebioda, Cam Tringale. Those guys will probably be the 3 most heavily owned guys by everyone doing DraftKings this week because they rate out so well statistically for the course and they've done well historically. So, the overall model ranking, no big surprise. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of really, really crappy putters on this list because this course, even though we did see putting come into play last year with Michael Thompson, and typically for guys to win, you have to putt well. It's also the hardest thing to predict. And for me, and the way that I approach things, I want guys who I can trust historically ball striking and hope that they have one of those peak weeks where they putt either at course or PGA Tour average, or like Morikawa did last week where he just has a phenomenal spike putting week and runs away with it. So there's a lot of bad putters in this list. The other guy that you can kind of look at here who is somewhat away from that narrative, well, 2 guys are Kirk and Tringale. Tringale's a very good putter. Kirk is a good putter, but also both of them are very good ball strikers as well, too. So, like I said, no big surprises. One guy that I love and the book that I use doesn't allow me to bet him for whatever reason. I can never find him on there is Jason Duffner. Duffner's been playing great as of late. If you look at his finishes and the way he rates out statistically, he's just been playing very, very, very well coming into this tournament. So Duffner's another guy that I really like. I just don't have access to Duffner this week.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised. I mean, Grillo is 9,300. I mean, yes, he had a 12th place finish at the Open, but prior to the Open, Tony, he had missed 3 straight cuts. So I'm actually surprised
Yep.
he's ranking out, rating out that high. But yeah, he had a great tournament with the Open. But I don't know, it scares me a little bit with him as well, coming off of 3 cuts. So maybe that form's starting to trend upwards. I don't know, but a little surprising for me on the pricing of him.
Well, I mean, the other thing too is so there's a recency bias with with DK pricing. Same thing with the odds, right? You just saw this guy come in basically the top 15 in the Open. He got some TV time. He played well, so you're going to see his price move up into that premium level, which is why Grillo's 9,300 on DK. But like if you look at it, you talked about it, he's missed 3 cuts prior to the Open. He lost strokes putting in every one of those events. The one prior to that, the Charles Schwab, he finished 8th and he gained 3.6 strokes putting. So really, that's been the difference for him. His ball striking has not changed much. The Rocket Mortgage, which was probably his worst approach tournament over the course of the last 4 or 5, but prior to that, he had gained in every one of the tournaments in approach. So again, you just got to hope that he's the Emiliano Grillo that ball strikes really well, and that he has what I would call a neutral putting week instead of losing, 3 or 4 strokes on the putting surface.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, we'll see. I mean, let's go into the odds here and check out some of these odds, Tony.
Yeah, so I mean, there's no big surprise. DJ, number 1 player in the world, he's the top of the board. Louis Oosthuizen, coming in right behind him. I'm actually a little bit surprised that both guys have stayed in, and I would not be surprised. We're here on a Monday night recording this, so you could see these guys withdraw before the tournament actually starts. For me, like when I look at this board, the odds aren't great. Especially at the top of the board, and there's really nobody under 20 to 1, Reed, Finau, Usti, DJ, that really lights me on fire. The odds are very reflective, and it's not to say that the guys can't win, but it's like I talked about. That price is just a little bit too high for me to pay. And for me, where I can go down and grab a few guys in the next range, that's probably where I'll be living and doing most of my bets this week, because there's just a lot more value in every one of those guys at that next tier. I think has just as good a shot as any one of the guys at the top, because the course is going to play so easy this week. It brings in so many different guys because, like we talked about in other hit and giggle courses, those big numbers, they're just not lurking. Again, there's water, so if you're airing off the tee and you're really airing off the tee, then you could end up in the drink and your tournament could be over really quick. But for the guys that are good ball strikers, that are good off the tee, that water's not going to come into play. And I think a lot of these guys will be there. So, finding some value. Seamus Powers is listed on here. He's already withdrawn from this tournament. There are a few guys that are interesting. Bubba Watson, I think I like a lot there. We talk about, guys with a lot of value. Watson's been playing fantastically. He took a break to not go over and play the Open. He's 35 to 1, had a good showing at the Rocket Mortgage, which I think is a good corollary course for this in terms of the kinds of things. Keegan Bradley and Cam Davis right there. Our boy Lebioda, who you could have got at 100 to 1 5 or 6 weeks ago, is now down to 40. Interestingly enough, Ricky Fowler, 40 to 1, Fowler right there. So, the board's shaping up not as good as I would have liked to have seen. There aren't a lot of great numbers out there, but I still think there's a lot of opportunity, especially as you, like I said, you get out of that very first tier under 30 to 1 and kind of look at guys with a little bit better odds.
Yeah, let's talk about Ricky for a little bit. I mean, he looked pretty good I think it was first 3 rounds. I mean, he wasn't killing it, but I mean, we kind of expected him to do well at the Open. And
historically does well at the Open.
He tanked on Sunday, but his game's been a struggle all this year. But I like him at 40 to 1. I know his type of game. He could show up. I mean, we've been waiting for him to show up. We're all Ricky fans, right? Who isn't a Ricky Fowler fan?
Yeah.
And what do you think of his game? I mean, what's happened with him, and and what do you expect to see from him in this tournament?
The thing for me with Fowler is we talk about guys and their number one weapon, right? And Ricky Fowler's weapon has always been his putter, right? He's just been a phenomenal putter. And this year, he just has not been good with the putter. As of late, the trend has been showing that he's been getting better. So I'm pulling the stats up here on Fantasy National. At Rocket Mortgage, he basically putted neutral. He lost strokes at the Traveler, missed the cut. He had two of his best putting days. He gained 3.9 and 4.4 at the Memorial and the PGA. And oddly enough, he basically had back-to-back top tens. So when Ricky's putter is working, he plays really, really well because he's not very good off the tee. His approach game is a roller coaster. He can be very good at times. He can be very bad. So he really needs to lean on the putter in order to score. And if we can get the kind of week from him like we saw at the Memorial at the PGA, he could be very live here. The issue for me is that I just haven't seen enough of it consistently enough to be able to put him in my player pool for potential guys on my card. And at 40-1, if Ricky's 60, if he's 50, I might think about it, right? Like I like Woodland at 50 way more than I like Ricky Fowler at 40, because Woodland, even though he has had some struggles off the tee, he's performing better with his best weapon than Fowler has been with his. With all of that being said, it just takes that week. And could Ricky win here? Absolutely. I wouldn't be surprised. And I think to your point, a lot of people would be happy if he did. For me, I need to see more of it. There's just been way too many blow up rounds. It's very reminiscent of kind of Jordan Spieth's struggles here a year and a half, 2 years ago, where he was just god awful. And, even when he was trying to get his game together off the tee, he could always lean on his short game and his putter. And when that left him, he was struggling. And that's kind of where Ricky is. It feels like he's starting to trend back. But for me, until I see him get out of that, the bottom half of the putting tier, I can't add him to my player pool.
Yeah, I totally understand. I'm hoping that he turns this around soon. He's a good guy.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't love Ricky Fowler? I mean, he's the most recognizable guy on the PGA Tour, arguably. He's a super nice guy. He's from where we live, right? We're from Marietta, Temecula. He's a local guy. He plays. When he's in town, he plays here. He's just a good dude. So I think we all want to see him to do well. Ryan, who's one of our good friends, stays in close contact with him. So we get little tips and things from Ryan and his contacts. And so we all want to see Ricky do well. It just this week, I don't know. Could he win? Yes, but it's just not for me. Like to quote Rick's famous words, if he burns me this week, he burns me.
Uh-oh. I might have to put something on him. Might have to get him. I had him in my lineups last week, by the way. He just I had a little showdown action with him, but one of the rounds, I forget whether it was the third round or fourth round. Oh my God, he tanked. It felt like every one of my guys in showdown just died. But anyhow, hoping to do better this week. All right, Tony, what everyone's waiting for, of course, is your betting card. So let's get there. Yep.
So this week, there are a lot of odds that I did not like. So I broke my cardinal rule. I was taking guys at odds that I don't like, but they've just been trending so well here recently. Tringale and Grillo being the two prime examples of those things. Both guys have just been fantastic over the last few weeks, and it feels like they're trending in a direction. And this is absolutely a course where the skill set and the way the guys have been playing correlate very, very highly. So the availability for them to win is there. Neither guy has won in quite some time, so it is a bit of a stretch. And those numbers, believe me, they make my stomach hurt to be able to make those bets. But I also didn't want to miss out. Bubba and Gary are prime examples of the exact opposite of that narrative, which is taking the best guy at a number that seems wrong. Bubba's been playing fantastic. He's found himself in contention over and over again in tournaments, played well at the Rocket Mortgage. And so I like both guys here at this course. Again, Woodland with the driver, his best weapon off the tee is important this week. Werenski's a guy who's been playing well. He's played well at this course. I think he's one of the few guys that has top 30s in both times that he's competed here, played well at the Rocket Mortgage, so I like Werenski this week. And then Chris Kirk, I talked about the putter, right? Chris Kirk has been putting very, very well. He's kind of Cam Tringale light in terms of the skill set, so I like Kirk a lot here as well. So that's kind of my main card. And then bombs. Hagy's a guy just over and over again for the last few weeks in some of these crappier tournaments who just seems to pop up and find himself in contention. Cam Champ, apologize for the misspelling. It's not Kagamp, it's Cam Champ. Champ showed well at the John Deere. Again, very similar skill set for what I think you're going to need to do well here. So it was nice to see him show up. Had a real shot going into Sunday and then kind of fell apart down the stretch. Adam Long's played well at this course historically, has not been that great this year, but at 125-1, a guy who at least statistically, with the things that he does well, rates out very well. Same narrative for Straka. And then Rafa, that is a prime example of the Bubba and Woodland narrative, which is a guy that just seems mispriced to me. Rafa hasn't been playing great, but he also has not been absolutely god awful, right? And at 150, that just seems wrong to me. If he plays well, I could see him winning. And he's a guy that 2 or 3 years ago was one of the best players in the world, a guy that was a favorite of ours on DFS. So I like Rafa at that number. I'll probably do some 20s and 10s on a lot of the similar guys in my bomb range, and even some guys toward the back end of my card, top 5s and top 20s. Truth be told, I've already added Lebioda, and I'm looking really, really, really hard at Ghim. He's another guy that I just feel like it's getting close, and he's right there. I just have a feeling that he's going to end up sliding into one of these weeks to get his first win. Lebioda's the guy we talked about. He's just been trending. I think he's got 3 or 4 top 5s in his last 4 tournaments. He's just been playing absolutely fantastic. With all that being said, it's been mostly putting, which is the most variable thing. So if his putter leaves him, he's in trouble because he has not been good on approach. His off the tee game is suspect as well too. So he really, really leans on the putter. But if he can show up the way that he has the last 3 or 4 weeks and continue that really strong play with the putter, you could see Lebioda again in there again. And he bombs the ball, absolutely smashes the ball off the tee. So I did add Lebioda to the car, and that's more of a FOMO bet, just fear of missing out. Because if he hits and I'm not on it as well as he's played, I'll feel like all those people felt about Morikawa winning the Open last week.
Yeah, so what I'm going to do after this stream's over, I will put all your bets in the description. And if you make any changes, Tony does a good job of letting me know, and I'll add any additions or changes that he makes to the card. I know he also tweets it out on Twitter. So, Tony, why don't you tell him about our DFS JAGS tag and where they can reach us?
Yep. So we've added a bunch of new followers on Twitter, which is fantastic. I appreciate everybody that's clicked that button. I love the interaction, so I encourage folks to be able to reach out to us, especially when they're asking questions about what we're doing, guys we like, guys we don't like, the approach that we're taking. So reach out to us on Twitter. It's at DFSJags on Twitter, or shoot us an email. Right. It's been cool to see the emails come through because it's more of a long form narrative where we can have a conversation with folks back and forth. But you can email us at dfsjags@gmail.com. So both places are great. I'm on Twitter constantly. That's usually the best place to get the most quick, up-to-date information. I enjoy Twitter. It's one of the funnest things in the world to me, to be able to poke people and to make fun of folks and to do it behind this mask of Twitter. So I really do enjoy it. I encourage, if you're interested in kind of engaging us and learning more about the way that we do things, that is absolutely the best way to do it.
Yeah, I loved your post. I don't know if we spoke about it early on in the recap, but I loved your post when you saw the Ander curse occur, and you retweeted that, and it was funny.
For all the things I said about Louis about not being scared and all of those things, as soon as I saw Tim Anderson post that, I'm like, he's done. He's been Ander cursed. It is over. I fully believe in that. For those of you guys that don't watch Pat Mayo and his show, great content. Mayo is the guy that got us into doing this in terms of watching what he does, the way that he approaches it, putting together a weekly show. So, everybody who's in the DFS space that's part of the community has been loving Mayo, and Tim is a central figure in all of that. He's probably the most influential guy in the reverse way that you can think of on their show. But once I saw that, I knew I was in the money with Morikawa, which we wanted to.
Yeah, that was so funny. Anyhow, so again, on Tony's data, reach out to him and get it. It's going to be very helpful for you, not only for the betting, but for our DraftKings show tomorrow. This is where you're going to want to narrow the pool. I mean, you got a kind of a rough field this week, and who are those gems, those hidden gems that you should be possibly looking at? This data is going to help you. So reach out, because it's going to be super helpful, and definitely, they'll be using it as part of the DraftKings show tomorrow night.
That's probably been the most rewarding thing for me. I mean, aside from hitting winners, right? It's always nice to be right, but all the other guys that are using the data, right? We've got this little community of guys now, dozens and dozens of folks that are kind of in our inner circle where we're passing this information around. But I love when those guys text me and you and say, "Hey, look what I did. Look what my buddy did using the data." Like that's cool to see. It shows that beyond what I'm doing or what you're doing or what Rick's doing, that is having a bigger impact. That other folks are finding success using the information. So that's always very, very cool. And I can't stress that point enough. If you're interested, if you want to find out more, if you want to do more, please reach out through one of those channels.
Yeah, cool. All right, Tony, we're at that point now. Let's talk about your top three. There's 3 picks to win this thing.
Yep. So I'll give you my 3. I already talked about him. Grillo, I think it's his time. And if I was to pick somebody, like I told you, even last night in our tech stream, he was an auto bet for me. So Grillo's 1. Bubba, I think Bubba's trending in a phenomenal direction. I really like Bubba this week. And then my last guy, I'm going to say is probably going to be Patrick Reed. Reed hasn't been playing great. But, again, Reed's the kind of guy that just kind of shows up, and when he plays well, he wins. He's right on that next level of guys. So it'd be Grillo, Reed, and Woodland. Who do you like this week, Mike?
So I like Wolf. I think Matthew Wolf is going to compete here. I'm going to go with some of the favorites. I mean, this to me, if I'm outside of your betting, your odds and stuff like that, Dustin Johnson. I think if he doesn't bow out, he blows his field away.
Yeah, well, I mean, DJ, he's the best player in the world. If DJ plays like DJ can, there's no question. I mean, last year he shot an 80 in the first round and withdrew from the tournament, and everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, what's wrong with him?" And then he came out and rattled off like 2 or 3 wins over his next 5 tournaments. Yeah. So if he plays to his ceiling, to your point, there's no question he's the best guy in the field.
And then, I was looking at Louis, but I can't go back to Louis. So
Louis doesn't win golf tournaments. I think we've established that.
Exactly.
He plays well. He'll finish top 5. He does not win golf tournaments.
So, Tony, I'm going to go with, I think you mentioned him too, Finau. I don't know if you picked him or not, but I'm going to go with Tony. I mean, I fully
expected you to pick Fowler just as your last guy
If I'm picking a dark horse, yes, it'd be Ricky. But, I mean, I'm talking about if I was just picking 3 that I think are going to win this, why not pick the number 1 golfer in the world? DJ and Tony Finau. I mean, he's got the potential. Guy shows up, he just never wins. So this is tough. And then Matthew Wolf. I think he's shown enough recently that he could actually take this thing as well. So those are my 3.
Yeah, Wolf's a great pick. Very, very popular. I've seen his odds drop dramatically since they opened. I think he opened at like 35 or 40. And he's trending closer to the high 20s now. So a lot of money's been moving onto him. I think he's very, very popular. Rightfully so. The guy's won here. He has a top 12. Again, he hasn't been in the most consistent form. He's been very open about his struggles with his mental health and those things going on, which I think is all positive. But yeah, I mean, if he came out and won this thing, I don't think anybody would be surprised. I just don't know if him winning here in not back-to-back years, but 2 out of the last 3 years, it's tough for me to see that.
Yeah. Agree. So, Tony, why don't you talk a little bit about what the people can expect tomorrow with the DraftKings show?
Yeah, so tomorrow night, Rico and I will be on the DDS of DFS, Rick Mukherjee. Rick and I will be on to talk about DraftKings strategy, lineups. DK pricing is just, oh my gosh, like I was telling you, it's just terrible. I think there's 100 guys priced below 7K. It's a very, very weak field, and so the pricing is very reflective of that. So it'll be interesting. I'm interested to get Rick's take on a number of different things, see where he likes his player pool, see if he's going to go chalky or what's going to happen. But we'll do that show tomorrow night. I think it's at 7 or 8 o'clock West Coast time. But we'll hop on and we'll spend a good amount of time talking about the field. I'll be sure to give him some crap about the Open because I think he got obliterated in the Open. Obviously, he made some money back at the Barbasol, hitting Seamus Power, but I'm excited to get his take for what he's going to be doing for DFS. And like we said, if he can hold true, if he's really the money man of crappy fields, this is definitely the event for him.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. That first show last week was awesome. I think we got a lot of great feedback from people on that show, and I think we're going to continue. Now, he did make a call that was a little questionable, but I think he's going to redeem himself. But Rick will tell you, like you said earlier in the podcast, this is where he shines in these crappy fields. So looking forward to that because I'm going to need some definite help this week with picking some lineups. And I'll tell you what, a lot of the information he gave me last Tuesday was very helpful. My lineups were pretty strong. Where I failed, Tony, and I should have listened to Rick more, is I went all in on our boy Brendan Grace. I mean, he was one of your bets at 60 to
Yeah.
1. Everything, when you talk links, I'm like, Brendan Grace, he's my guy.
Yeah.
Dude, he tanked on me. And if I had listened to Rick even talked about it. It wasn't his guy. He was staying away from him. And that's the only guy in my lineups that failed me. And there were so many others that Rick had mentioned that I could have picked and had 6 to 6 through. So I did get one 6 to 6 through, but unfortunately it was a lineup that just didn't score. I mean, they were all towards the bottom.
That's the central reason why I'm not as heavily invested in DFS as I am in betting, because in DFS you have to get 6 guys right, and in betting you can have 6, 7, 8, 9 guys. You just need to get one of those guys right. Putting together 6 to 6 is tough, especially in majors. Brendan Grace, like we talked about, wind, weather, playing tough, scrambling. That's him to a T. Turns out you didn't need any of that crap this week. You needed to hit the ball in the fairway and stick greens, and that's just not his game.
Yeah.
So, no big surprise. He kind of bottomed out, took a lot of people down with him, along with Terrell Hatton and Reed. So it'll be interesting. I haven't checked the weather this week. My assumption is there isn't any, but that also is an important factor. So going into tomorrow night's show, we'll break down the weather as well too. Rick does a good job of kind of laying out what's happening with the forecast and what's going to happen. So we'll have to figure out where we should be. My gut is that a lot of folks are going to be very, very balanced this week because it is so garbage at the bottom of the board. You're going to have a lot of folks that are playing guys in the high sevens, high sevens and high eights, trying to build a balanced field, thinking that those are the guys that are going to be in contention this week. So a more stars and scrubs approach could get you some leverage on the field. It could also get you 0 of 6 through. So we'll see what Rick's take is.
These are tough fields. So definitely counting on his information to help me out, because these are fields that I just never have a chance on as seems. So good stuff there. I do want to mention this Sunday, Nickel City Mafia. We're going to be talking about the Sabres draft. Draft starts this Friday, ends on Saturday. My dad and I had a great session this past Saturday. Normally, we always stream on Saturday mornings, but we wanted to have both rounds of the NHL draft completed. So we'll be coming to you live on Sunday morning at 7 o'clock. So super fun. I'm sporting a little bit. You couldn't see it real much. I'm kind of sporting the Nickel City with the Bills here, but it's going to be all Sabres this upcoming Sunday. So good stuff there as well. Tony?
Absolutely, yeah. All things Buffalo. That is definitely your shtick. It's funny because I give you crap all the time about being from Buffalo, but for a lot of the sports teams this year, Buffalo's trending in the right direction, man. They're turning the corner.
Yeah, I know. You only like the Bills, Tony, because Josh Allen's become one of your favorite fantasy football guys. So that's typically.
Time out. When they drafted him, I called it because, again, you know me, I'm a huge Boise State guy. It's where I played. I love the Broncos. They play in the same division as Wyoming, where he came from. And I told you when he was coming out, I'm like, this dude is special. He's big. He's fast. He's strong. He just checks all the boxes. And you're like, well, I don't know. And then when they drafted him, I was like, dude, this is a home run pick. If this kid can stay healthy, it's a home run pick. So you're right. More from the perspective of me wanting to be right than anything else, but I am very glad that Josh Allen is having success.
For sure, he was the best pick out of all those quarterbacks taken in the first round. It's worked out fantastic for us, so we're super happy. Anyhow, cool stuff. Any closing thoughts, Tony?
No, man, I'm excited. I actually really enjoy these weaker subfields. I probably will do some live stuff, live betting as well too, seeing if I can get some odds. I've hit some winners in the past. Brian Gay's the best example of that. I hit him on a Saturday at 80 to 1. So I will be watching the live odds, and I'll tweet out any of that stuff on the @DFSJags Twitter feed if anybody's interested in any of the live odds that I'll be adding during the tournament. Because in a field like this where things can change drastically, you have a guy who go out and shoot 7, 8, 9 under. You get some really tasty live odds. So don't forget to follow the live odds out there if you are betting.
Yeah, and then finally for me, Tony, I mean, if you like what you're seeing, give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and give us some comments. We love getting comments about the content we provided. Tony puts a lot of work into this. I do as well, and Rick does as well. It's a lot of fun for us, but we love to hear your comments because that's how we meet people. We love meeting people. Like Tony mentioned earlier, we love that our data is helping some folks out there, and it's just, again, we're not professional gamblers by any means. We
No,
dabble in it. We tell you that.
we have day
Right?
jobs.
We have
That's
day
for sure.
jobs, absolutely. But this is fun for us, and again, I love it that we have all things Buffalo on the weekends, and then we throw in some other things during the week, which is all golf. So super cool stuff. Anyhow, thank you, and again, give us a little like and subscribe, please. Tony, final thought? You good?
Good, brother. Appreciate it, man. Thanks for all your hard
All
work,
right.
Mike.
Have a good night, everyone. Take care.